Well, hello, my name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati in Hamilton County. And I'm interviewing today Dr. Richard Bozian. And this is March the 22nd, 2007. And through the courtesy of our wonderful operator and historian here, Dennis Daly, we're in this very nice setting here in the library. And Dick, it's just a pleasure to not only be able to do an interview, but do it with an old friend.
Right.
And tell me, where were you born, Dick?
Springfield, Mass.
Springfield, Mass.
1919.
1919.
87.
You're
Plus.
87. Boy, oh boy, you
Yes,
look
old vintage.
all those Armenians, you know?
Right, yeah, they stay right in there.
Absolutely. Well, that's just terrific. And you grew up there in Springfield?
Yeah, early years, and then we moved to New Jersey.
Elementary school, where'd you go in elementary school?
I started school in Springfield. In Jersey City. We moved to Jersey, and Jersey City and Hackensack, New Jersey.
Okay, right across the river there, from
Right.
the Big Apple.
Right near the Big Apple, across the river.
Say so. And then high school, how about high school?
Hackensack High School.
Hackensack High School.
Graduated in 35.
What did you do in high school? You had interests in...
Oh, I was interested in sports, but I was a shrimp, so I wasn't, and I couldn't make the varsity team. But I was interested in baseball, and but as I say, I was short and didn't get to make anything.
Did you have any particular hobbies that had any effect on your life or anything like that?
Well, my hobbies were reading and sports, spectator sports, and I played semi-pro baseball actually in my early years. But those were my main things.
I understand. Surely, I understand. Well, then after high school, so you would have gotten out of high school, what, 1937?
35.
35.
I was very young.
You were very young.
16.
I should say you were.
Yeah, I graduated at 16. Well, in those days, Ted, if you were a pretty good student, they'd have you jump grades.
Yes.
And then my father would, I would go to summer school too. Keep me occupied during the summer. I'd go to summer school and then get promoted another grade. So I graduated at 16. And at that time, it was the Depression, and times were very tough.
Yes.
But I got a scholarship to pharmacy school.
Oh.
Yeah, and I started pharmacy school at 35.
Oh, for heaven's
And
sake.
that was, in those days, it was a first-time four-year course. And I liked pharmacy.
And you were only 16.
Yeah, going into college, yeah.
Good heavens, that's terrific.
It was interesting. I was a kid, you know, and I was short.
Well, that was right there in Hackensack, was it?
No, in New Jersey. That was Rutgers University.
Oh, at Rutgers.
So I was commuting daily
I
to
see.
college, you know. It was about 10 miles. We had a carpool and I'd go to school and what have you. And then in the summer I would work in a drugstore. And that was an important part of what I did subsequently, because in '39, after I graduated, I had an internship in a drugstore, and then that's when the rumblings were going on in Europe. And then the draft came in '41. I also was teaching at the college as an assistant. And as I was telling Mr. Daly, that everybody around, when the draft started, everybody around me was going into the Army. And my two brothers were in the service, one in the Navy and one in the Army, and I was kind of itchy and wanting to get in too.
Right.
And so I was working in a drugstore, and we were manufacturing chemicals for Bendix Aircraft. That was a large corporation with thousands of employees, and I was in charge of manufacturing cough syrups and things like that. So I was getting deferments from the draft board. I had a very high draft number, but I was very itchy and anxious to get into the service. And as I mentioned earlier, I was also interested in going to med school. Working in a drugstore, I got interested in medicine. And the Army offered an opportunity to do ASTP program and go to med school and so forth. So I wrote to the draft board and I said to them, look, my employers will be asking for deferments for me, and I don't want you to honor it. I want to go into the service. So the next time the time came, I was drafted. My family didn't know, and they assumed that I got drafted. And I went into the Army. And they closed down the ASTP program.
Right.
And I had basic training, and then had an opportunity to go to Officer Candidate School, which I did at Carlisle Barracks as a administrative officer. Those days it was called MEC, Medical Administrative Corps. And at the end of
where was that located?
Carlisle Barracks in Pennsylvania.
Oh, yes, sure.
That was interesting. How I ever got through OCS, I don't know, because I didn't know anything about the Army. I just had basic training, but I managed to get through. And at the end of that, was one of the critical things was that an opportunity came to go to what they called, to become a battalion aid officer, or battalion aid station assistant, BSA. And that would have been service on the front lines.
Oh, yes.
What would be today a physician's assistant.
Yeah.
You know, like you have emergency medical technicians.
Right.
That was kind of foolhardy because if you went through that program for 3 or 4 months, then you would go to South Pacific, to the front lines.
Right.
But you know, when you're young, you don't care.
That's right.
And so I volunteered for that. And but MacArthur said, I want physicians at the front lines for the morale purposes. So they canceled it. I got my commission, but I never did go overseas, and I ended up on hospital trains, which was a very wonderful experience because we were carrying wounded folks from one place, a part of the country to another. It was a very broadening experience, and I traveled all over the United States as an administrative officer on the hospital trains and so on.
What a great experience.
And that was a great experience, very broadening, meeting all kinds of people, working with doctors
I
and
should
so on.
say, do you have, for example, did you have any fellow officers or people, military personnel with you that you became great friends with and stuck in your life?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about some of those experiences.
Yeah, I had many. First of all, we had people coming back from the European theater, you know, with frostbite, what have you, and the South Pacific. And boy, the ones from the South Pacific were very sad because they were very depressed because of their experiences, and they had fungus from the jungle rot, you know, and so forth.
Malaria.
So, yeah. And to me, I had contact with many physicians and nurses and so forth, and that further whetted my appetite about medicine. And it was a great experience.
Now, were you exposed to communicable diseases or anything like
Not
that?
really. No, not really. My job on the train was to make sure that we had supplies and also to collect from the officers for I think they used to charge 35 cents a pill and so forth. But it was, you know, it was kind of routine kinds of things, but very broadening and meeting all kinds of people.
Did you attend to the wounded soldiers? Or?
No, I was not a physician, you know. I was an administrative officer, but there were doctors and nurses and what have you taking care of these chaps.
Right.
And boy, I heard their war experiences.
Wow.
Oh man, that was very, very tremendous. And some of them very positive, some very negative. They told us about how they would sometimes take prisoners and go in the back and shoot them because they were very bitter about things. But that was very elevating. And then I got an opportunity I got transferred to Governor's Island, which is right off New York City. And there I was working in headquarters, 1st Army, and my job there was to, again, administrative, working with a colonel and so forth. My job was to receive reports from the European theater, the Pacific theater, where there would be ships coming in and they would have to estimate how many ambulances would be needed to take care of the thing. And that was a very broadening experience because I did calculations and decided that we would need for this month 50 ambulances from around that area. Next month another 50 or what have you. And I put in a report and the colonel got it and gave it to the general. And boy, the following week when I come in, the colonel calls me in and he says, "Bozian, you SOB, you're destroying me." And what happened was that the general gave him hell because I had requested only an exact number of ambulances. And I learned a very valuable lesson that in the service, you have to prepare for emergencies.
Yes.
You can't play it exactly according to the rules, you know, that you only need such and such. And the general, very conscientious, wonderful guy, he raised holy hell with the colonel. And that was a very interesting experience. And at that point, I was interested in being regular Army as far as medicine was concerned.
Where were you based in?
The Governor's Island.
That was Governor's
right
Island.
Off the Battery.
Sure.
Down
Right there,
in New York City.
Manhattan.
So again, I had a very interesting experience then, which I'll
tell us about that.
I was with the hospital trains, and as I said, my job was to would be to collect monies from the officers for their meals. They would pay 35 cents a meal. And I got in on this weekend, and instead of reporting directly, I went off, I don't remember what I did, somewhere in Brooklyn or somewhere, and then didn't report it until Monday. So I got called in by my commanding officer, and he laced me in and out about regulations and that I had made off with Army funds illegally, and he was going to put it on my record and so forth, and I violated it. So I said, of course, and I felt very bad about it and so forth. So later on, I got transferred to Governor's Island, and they were having a reception for retiring officers. And I was the low man on a totem pole, way at the long end of colonels, generals, and what have you. And lo and behold, this commanding officer from the hospital trains was retiring. He was a major, and he's going down the line. And he comes to me, and he looks at me, and he leans over, and he says, "How the hell did you get here?" The last guy in the world that he would have thought would show up at this Army headquarters. It was so wonderful. How the hell did you get here?
Well, tell us some more interesting personal experiences you had.
Well, I'll tell you one of them that was very sad and very funny also was that on the hospital trains we would load up in Staten Island and we'd go through tunnels there under the Hudson River and so forth. And these were steam engines in those days. And the car compartment would fill up with smoke. And I'm walking from one train to the other, and the conductor had left one of the side doors open, and in the confusion, I walked off the train. Right in the tunnel, wheels going by and so forth, and it was a very frightening experience. And I didn't know where I was, and I'm hearing the train wheels going by and so forth, and I hear water lapping, and I thought maybe I was in the river. I knew. So I started yelling, "Help, help, help," you know, and the train stopped, and then it started again, and then another train came, and once again I started yelling, and I couldn't see, it was dark, and then I began to see a little bit, and I hugged the wall. Anyway, to make the story short, they had heard me on the train, and they sent some workers in, and they came, about 10 minutes later and picked me up, and I joined my train again up in Utica, New York. But the story got around that I had been drunk and had walked off the train. Oh. So whenever I went around the country with my hospital trains, and I would, meet someone, and they'd say, "Oh, we know about you. You're the guy that got loaded and walked off a train." I said, "No, I wasn't loaded."
Isn't that something?
Yeah, everybody knew about this experience.
What a terrifying experience.
It was.
Good heavens, my gracious.
Yeah.
Well, now you said that you had the opportunity, thanks to the Army, of seeing most of the country.
Oh yeah, it was a very broadening experience. I grew to really enjoy military service and the experiences and what have you. And I would see nothing wrong with everybody having a crack at it. To me, it opened up a whole new world to me. Responsibilities, getting a commission and so forth and so on. It was a great experience. And I was just lucky. My brothers, oh my God.
Particularly being from the Northeast, you hadn't seen any other parts of the country to speak of?
I went up and down, around and around.
Got to the West Coast?
West Coast, East Coast, South, everywhere. Yeah, and going to hospitals and transporting people. A very broadening, wonderful experience.
How did you feel when you started, you were on a train and you were moving west, all of a sudden the Great Plains and then the mountains and everything? My goodness, that must have been a real eye-opener for you.
I think a really great experience. My brothers, of course, had a terrible time. My brother was in North Africa with the invasion into Sicily and so forth. And my brother in the Navy was on a destroyer at Guadalcanal, and his ship was sunk.
Really?
He had a tough time. So my family, my two brothers had a difficult time.
Did they survive?
Oh yeah, both of them did.
Oh, that's
My brother, the Navy guy, he was there at that Battle of Guadalcanal where the cruisers came by and knocked off so many and what have you. And his ship was sunk. He was in the water with sharks.
Do you remember the name of the ship that he was on?
The Cushing, USS Cushing.
Oh, the Cushing
Yeah,
destroyer.
Sure.
Tin can.
Yeah, tin can.
Yeah. Well, see, I was in that battle too.
Were you?
Yeah. And
Longa Point was the...
Longa Point.
Longa Point.
Sure.
That was where my brother was.
Absolutely. Well,
and he was in the water overnight, you know.
Good.
Sharks, but the oil kept the sharks away. He said otherwise he'd have been gone.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a difficult time.
Oh my gosh.
He could hear the Japanese talking, you know. That's how close the cruises were that were going by. So you were in the same battle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was on a small.
My brother never really got over the experience then.
Oh.
To this day, he would not go on a cruise or anything.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. It really affected him.
Yes, I know that there are many men were terribly affected by that. I was very lucky, but you're seeing the country, and then of course at the same time you were mixing with all sorts of people.
All kinds of people, exactly. And you know that, by the way, basic training particularly was really an experience.
Wasn't that an eye opener?
Oh God, and from all over the country. World War II, that was really something.
Yeah.
That anybody can enjoy.
It's
brilliant. You develop tolerance, you understand your own culture and other people's culture, what have you. Very positive experience.
You certainly have hit it on the nose, Dick. Well, any more humorous experience? Tell us, did you meet any famous people? Didn't meet Joe DiMaggio or anybody like that?
No, of course I was a ball fan. No.
Of course, I know that.
Yeah. I do remember the Surgeon General making a visit. This is interesting. Surgeon General making a visit and giving a talk at the First Army headquarters. And he was talking about war and responsibilities and what have you. And he said, you know, people don't understand. There was a small hospital at the entrance to New York Bay that had about 50 beds and had doctors and nurses, but they had nothing to do. And everybody would be complaining and what have you. But he said we had to keep it open because we never knew when it might be some bombs and what have you later. We had to be ready for emergency. But everybody was very critical and complaining. And that's part of the
hurry up and wait and all that sort of thing.
Be ready. And they says, and you gotta have, and the Congress will never support you. They won't give you the money, but if an emergency comes up and you haven't done the job, they will not forgive you for it. But that was a very valuable lesson about military. That and the experience of the general tells you a little bit about how, you know, the thing operates, and you really appreciate what's going on. I can't think of any important people that I met, you know. Second lieutenant, first lieutenant, who you know. But the professionals were wonderful. And all the doctors would always be complaining about the fact of how much they were losing, you know.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you heard
how it changed their career and how they were being denied their money-making opportunities.
Oh, yeah, they complained.
Having a private practice and so forth. You know, I came from the West Coast, and one of the interesting things, I came from the far Northwest, one of the interesting things to me was going to boot camp in San Diego, California in early 1942.
Were you enlisted or were you officer?
I enlisted.
You enlisted, right.
Yeah, I became an officer later, but I enlisted. And, the interesting thing to me, because in those days, as you well remember, we were all interested in swing music, big bands.
Oh yeah.
You know, Glenn Miller and Tommy Dorsey.
Dorsey.
Benny Goodman and all that crowd. And then Did you get to Southern California? Did you get to Hollywood or anything like that?
No, no, not during that time.
You never got that?
No, no, I never did.
I see.
Oh, yeah, I remember those were good old days. And Woody Herman.
Woody Herman. Well, and you're coming from the East Coast, my gosh.
Frank Sinatra.
Sure.
That was the next town, over from my hometown.
Absolutely, there you were. Did you ever see him?
Oh, yeah, I remember, and I used to go to, and he was, you know, people were swooning over him, and we'd go to dances, and Sinatra would appear. You know, he was supported by the mafia, you know.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, but he was great. I remember Frank Sinatra.
He was.
I saw him a number of times.
Well, you know, and that brings to mind the old hotels in Manhattan. The great hotels, they had the residence bands and you go there and dance?
Oh, yeah, we'd go there, and I remember, yeah, those were the days, in the early days of the war. We'd go over, my day off, I was working in a drugstore, we'd go over to New York, and go to those very things, a hotel,
Sure.
and
Hotel Denison, places like that?
I'm trying to think now that,
Hotel
Guy Lombardo was at the Roosevelt Hotel, that I remember.
Okay.
But there was another one, can't think of his name, he was a Latin with a red-headed girlfriend.
Yeah, the guy from Cuba.
Cuba, yeah, red-headed girlfriend. He was
Yes,
beautiful.
cha-cha-cha.
Yes, he was one of my, and she was beautiful, red-headed girl, long hair. I remember her very well. I used to go over, I had in fact, oh, that's interesting, one of my good buddies there, he was single, an Episcopal minister. We used to go over to New York, and we'd go to have dinner, and go to bookstores, and go to the hotel dances and what have you. Yep, I had a very good time.
Well, I remember...
Xavier Cugat, that's the guy.
Cugat, absolutely.
Right.
Oh, yes,
Yep.
yeah. And he had a little Chihuahua dog that
Yes,
he was holding
yes.
in his arm
Yeah.
while he was conducting the band.
He was
All that
great,
sort
he
of-
was great.
Well, you know, also, and this is one of the particularly interesting things in my life is music and the big band era and so forth. And Glenn Miller was playing, I used to hear it on the radio. I never got there to see him, but I heard it on the radio, clear out on the West Coast, from the Hotel Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania,
In
right?
downtown Manhattan. And then he'd play that tune, Pennsylvania 6500.
6500, Pennsylvania 6500, that was his. Begin to begin and what have you.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh, yes.
Those guys.
Artie Shaw.
Artie Shaw.
Oh,
Yeah.
those wonderful
The
people.
drummer guy, I can't think of his name. The
Oh,
drummer.
yeah. Mhm.
He was,
Yeah,
it was
think
great.
of that one.
Yeah, those were great days.
Those were great days. And you know, how different it is from today.
But,
How different it is
oh,
from
yeah.
today.
Oh, yeah.
Not only technology and everything, but philosophy.
Absolutely.
You felt, and you are a wonderful example of the spirit of that period. And, you know, you intermingled not only with medical people and wounded soldiers and sailors and so forth, but you also had the opportunity to apply what you learned in school. That was so important.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Your background in pharmacy must have been invaluable.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was great. In a drugstore, Ted, you see how changes in personality. When people are sick, you know, they can be irritable and obnoxious and what have you. And then you see them when they're well, and you learn to deal with people. Drugstore was, you know, in my day, a drugstore was a very exciting profession. Then the cut rate stuff came in, and then it was no longer fun. That was another reason why I left pharmacy, because when I started at pharmacy, it was a real artful profession. We made suppositories and we made preparations and so forth. Then it became a real business-like kind of thing. It wasn't the same fun as it was originally.
Well, you brought up an interesting fact that about the drugstore, the pharmacy in those days, and particularly in small towns.
Oh, yeah.
I remember reading years ago that the basic foundation of an American small town, you know, we're talking about 3,000 to 5,000 people, maybe way out west or down south or somewhere like that, away from the big cities. your basic economic, financial foundation for a small town had to have a bank, had to have a grocery store, had to have a drugstore.
They had a drugstore, and it was the center.
That was the center.
Oh, yeah.
And it was.
Oh, yeah, I drank sodas. You know, we had a soda fountain. The old time, just like Applebee's here in town, you know, with those chairs and what have you.
Sure.
Yeah, I drank. And a drugstore was...
It was a social point, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And, you know, the policeman would come in and you'd give them Cokes and ice cream and what have you. The drugstore was, you know, you were a confidant, and people depended on you as a pharmacist for advice about medicines and stuff. It was a very interesting profession then. I think it's very different today.
I think it is too.
It's not the same
I think
fun.
it is too. There are certain places still that you get a feeling of the old time, but and of course younger generations today don't understand that.
No idea.
You know, and this brings up another thing about the spirit of America during the war and the dedication of the nation.
Oh, yeah.
Toward the war.
Very
not
different
only
today.
not only the military, but the home front.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
You
Yeah,
got-
those days, like I wanted to go to med school, but I also was very patriotic, you know, and I wasn't worried about my skin. You know, when you're young, you don't figure that anything's going to happen to you. I never thought. When I was going to go to the South Pacific, the front lines, that didn't bother me.
Wow.
You know,
I know.
I wasn't
That's exciting.
Yeah, it was a pretty exciting experience. Yeah.
I remember having that same feeling.
Yeah.
Well, the war went on. Of course, you got in early, and you stayed throughout.
Yeah, and then I went to med school from there,
You went to med school.
out of the Army, right? See, and that
This would have been
GI Bill of Rights, you know,
Late.
all of that.
Yeah.
In 46. I started in 46 and graduated in 50
Oh, I should say, where did you go to med school?
at Albany, New York.
New York.
And that was a chance. It was very hard getting in med school in those days.
Oh.
So my service helped me. You know, the fact that I was a veteran. I was one of the older guys going to med school because
Yeah.
I'd been out for a while, you know. And that was a good experience.
Sure.
That was, yeah, so the Army was a launch pad for me for both as an experience in and of itself and also the opportunities that it provided for me. Yep.
Well, that's interesting. So you were there 4 years at Albany, and then what happened after you got out?
Then I went internship, University of Chicago, and that's where I met my wife, who would come up there to do graduate work. And then I did my training in New York City at Bellevue Hospital. And then after that, I went into academic medicine. I was in academic medicine, you know, teaching research and so forth.
Right.
And I traveled New York, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and then finally Cincinnati here. We came here in '63.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Bellevue.
Yeah.
That, I've read about Bellevue.
Oh, yeah.
And that must have been a world unto itself. In Manhattan.
Yep, that was quite a place. Yeah, Bellevue Hospital was one of the classic big city hospitals, you know. Bellevue and Louisiana Charity Hospital and Los Angeles and so forth and so on. So in those days, that was a top training place, and that was a real great opportunity. That was fun. So I've had an interesting life.
Well, I should
And
say
a lot of opportunity. As you said, Ted, our generation really was something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had great opportunities that I think today. Of course, there's still opportunities, but it's quite different.
Well, it is quite different.
It's quite different.
And there's
Wouldn't trade it.
a different attitude in academia today.
Oh, today it's corporation.
Oh,
You
yeah.
might as well work. You might as well be in a corporation, and it's not the same. Academia. When I went in and I was doing research, and I would get a grant. And they would give you the grant, and they didn't care what you did with it.
Uh-huh.
You could pursue anything you wanted. They just wanted to know that you were legitimate, that you had a real interest, and then they would give you the go-ahead.
And it's
But that's not the way it is
using
today.
it properly.
Yeah.
Right.
Today it's all planned, and you have to be part of a team. Individual researcher now is very little opportunity.
Is that so?
But that doesn't mean it's not right.
No,
but
no.
it's different.
No, that's true.
It's different. My day, you could be a loner, and could do a nice job.
And what a great personal building experience it was.
Oh, yeah.
To have the opportunity and to be on your own and to pursue, and you realize that you had to, if you were going to make it, it was up to you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's all your own responsibility. Yeah, that's great. Cincinnati was a great experience. So that's back in '63 until I retired in 88, I guess.
Good, yeah.
And then I've been busy now since volunteer work.
Yes.
It's been fun.
Well, it's
been fun.
you and I got acquainted.
Where did you work, Ted? I don't remember knowing what you
Well,
did.
I came from the West Coast in 1955.
55.
55, and I was in the wood products industry. And then that changed, and then a number of things. But the interesting thing about you, Dick, is, and your ability to express yourself so well. You've always had that ability. I've known you long enough to realize that, and your winning personality and everything. I would, looking back, don't you feel that had an effect on the people that you contacted, particularly the soldiers and so forth?
I think so.
On those trains moving across the country and
Yep.
so forth.
Yeah, that was a real broadening experience. We had fun, and you know what? In those days too, you would have the authority to call Washington and say, you know, when we would go into a place like Chicago, we'd like to stay there an extra day. You said we don't have enough food and what have you, and we get an extra day out of it. And you could get the okay from Washington, and they would
Sure.
they would say, okay, you can stay until Thursday instead of Wednesday and so forth.
And did you find that when you were in a place like Chicago and you had your uniform on?
Oh, Chicago was the most wonderful city.
Wasn't that the
Boy,
greatest
they were
place?
oh my God, and, you know, everything was offered for the service person.
Right.
Yeah, we slept in hotel lobbies, you know.
Sure.
Oh yeah, the fanciest hotel in the place, they'd let you sleep on the couch.
Yeah.
We'd do that. It was great. Chicago was a wonderful, Chicago, a very hospitable place.
Very nice.
Well, of all the cities in the country, probably the most hospitable for a service person.
Well, I went
Chicago.
through a primary flight training at Glenview Naval Air Station,
Oh,
right up the line.
so you were in the Air Force and the Navy?
Navy at the end of the war, but I had three active years in the South Pacific before I got into that. But Chicago was wonderful.
Can't beat it.
I mean, Chicago and San Francisco were two of the greatest liberty towns in the world.
Right.
And Chicago in those days had so much great jazz music. And you get all the jazz spots around the Loop, Randolph Street, State Street.
Maybe so. Maybe I don't remember it that much. Yeah, it was big. You know, and Chicago was a kind of a head town then, when you think about it, compared to today.
Well, it was
a
friendly.
warm, friendly little town.
It
grew afterward.
Oh,
you know? Yeah. So it was big on jazz, huh? Chicago.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
Around the Loop there were places, and the war was still on, and you could go in there, as you say, and they'd welcome you with open arms, free drinks, you know,
Right,
on
everything.
house.
The house.
You wore your ribbons, and people would salute you. Well, you just have had such a wonderful.
No heroes, no big battles, and what have you.
That's
It was
right.
quite an experience.
Oh, I know. Well, you were a tremendously influential person, and in your position, you had much responsibility, and
Oh, yeah.
you carried that off so well. I'm sure that people who came in contact with you were very, very thankful for Dick Bozian. And
Whatever.
did you get into the South, the deep South at all? Did you get down into Georgia?
Georgia, down in Thomasville, there was a hospital there. I remember going there, and I don't remember. There might have been some others. I don't recall. I do remember Thomasville, particularly the VA hospital there. Yeah, we hit all over the country. And in those days, there were hospitals were specialty. There'd be one place that would be for amputees, you know.
Oh.
Another one would be psychiatric and
Oh,
so
yeah.
forth. And I, listening to the stuff about Walter Reed Hospital. Walter Reed Hospital is a fantastic place, beautiful hospital, and it's had some problems now.
I know, it's kind of...
It's very sad.
It's very sad, and you wonder how do things like that happen?
Well, some of it, first place, is old. Secondly, they did a lot of privatization, and I think that's where some of the problem has arisen. And there hasn't been enough of the professionals running the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great institution. Great institution.
Well, I should say, and Walter Reed, of course, the name Walter Reed.
Right.
Very important. The
Yep.
guy that discovered
Panama Canal, yellow fever, and all
yellow
that.
fever,
Right.
I should say.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask you about getting into different parts of the country, did you have contact with civilians in those places? Did you get a feeling you were in a different part of the world or something?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you coming out of Massachusetts and New York, good heavens.
Down south. Oh yeah, I think military is military is a very broadening, wonderful experience. I have nothing but fond memories of my experience and the opportunities that I had through service, which I never would have anticipated would be the case.
I know.
Yep.
Well, if your attitude and your willingness and your eagerness, of course, sustained you through life.
Oh yeah.
Here you are at 87. My goodness, you don't look day over 70.
Yep. Only thing I know, my kids though are 50, so that tells you. I wouldn't know how old I am, Ted, except that my youngster,
Right.
my youngest boy, who's an actor in Hollywood, he was born in '60, so he's 47. So you can't forget your age when you know that your children are 50 years old. You have children?
Oh yes,
older?
yeah. We
they
have
older?
2 sons and a daughter.
How much?
We have everybody here in town.
Oh, you do?
My wife and I are both from Oregon, but we came here in '55, and so our children were born in Ohio, and they all live here, and our grandchildren are here. You mentioned your son, your young son, who's an actor in Hollywood. Tell us about him.
Well, he's a star. He's had a lot of movies, and he's always been that close to being big time, and he's never quite made it. And now he's writing plays, and he does stand-up comedy. And when he gets, he's done movies, a number of movies, but never quite hit the big time. And we've never been happy about his being there, but he loves it, and he's been there for about 20 years or so, and he enjoys it.
How about your other children?
Well, I've got an older son who's a computer person, who's very successful, and he's involved in a personal rapid transit project now that's very, very exciting. And the middle son is a computer person, and right now he's in Africa, working with the Tanzanian government on telecommunication or what have you. And my older daughter's a legal services lawyer in Marietta. She runs an office there.
Oh, really?
Another daughter's a postal employee.
Marietta, Ohio, or Marietta, Georgia?
Pardon? Marietta, Ohio.
Ohio.
Just
Right
up
up
north.
the river, sure.
Yeah. She's very active in legal aid society. She runs an office and is active in her community and so forth. We're very happy.
You mentioned your wife and meeting your wife in Chicago.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, she had come up, she's from the South, from Dothan, Alabama. And she went up to the University of Chicago to do her master's in nursing, and I met her there. I was interning, and I met her there. And she had an interesting experience because she's a great reader of novels, and mystery stories and what have you. And she'd heard about Chicago and the gangs and Al Capone and what have you. And her sister, when she got on the train, says, "Watch out for those gangsters in Chicago." When she got to Chicago, when she got out of a taxi cab, and the L was operating, and the L rattles, and as she got out of the taxi cab, this L was going overhead, and she thought it was machine gun fire. And she took for cover. She was frightened to death. The camera said, wait a minute, it's nothing, this is only the L. She was sure that there were machine guns going off. He tells that story. That was really...
Oh, isn't that interesting? You met her at the University of Chicago?
Yeah, I met her as a nurse, and we recorded it. And in fact, I wanted to stay at the University of Chicago because it was a great institution. But she was from the South and it was too cold. She said, Richard, if you stay in Chicago, we're not getting married. And that's when I decided that I'd go to New York and get a post there, you know.
Right.
But I've always accused her of that I would have won the Nobel Prize if I stayed at University of Chicago. And because of her, I went to New York and just ended up. So,
Well, she could adjust to New York.
oh yeah, she did. But she, you know, with her heavy Southern accent, I do remember that. It reminds me of a story we were having in those days. In training, you got nothing. I got $0 a month, and all you got was food and housing, right? And I had married, and then they raised it. I think we got 90. And I used to bring my wife to the hospital for a meal. You know, we get a free meal, right? And I do remember sitting around one evening with my fellow interns and residents and what have you, and somebody was telling a story, or she was, and she kept saying, wah. And she meant to say wah. She tried to say why and kept saying wah. And they couldn't understand her, you know. Yeah. And she got embarrassed and she flushed and was nervous and what have you. It was kind of cute. Yeah.
Well, that's...
I know you got along on nothing, you know. In those days when you trained, you didn't get paid anything for an internship. $50 a month was a lot of money.
That was it.
So you went into debt. I went into debt during my internship.
Oh, I'm sure.
$1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, it was a different kind of thing. And you mentioned the Great Depression, and of course I remember it very well too. And I just passed my 86th birthday, so anyway. But having been born in 1921, and I was talking with somebody the other day, and you can relate to this so well. I said, I remember Calvin Coolidge as president.
Oh, I remember when he was, yeah. He'd been, right? Old Silent Cal, right?
Oh, yeah.
So conservative.
Out of Vermont.
Yeah. I remember Herbert Hoover in the medicine ball that they used to throw around.
Sure.
And Taft had been president. I'd heard of him, but he wasn't dead. Yeah.
That's right. And Taft.
Old Howard Taft.
Well, that's interesting too. You know about Taft being from Cincinnati, of
right?
Course. He was the only president to, after having served as president, to become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Right.
And one other thing about Taft is you'll remember this, that before he became president, he was governor of the Philippines.
That's right. Yep.
He took his whole family over there, and his children grew up in the Philippines, and then they came back to Ohio. Yep. Well, you know, do you have any more reminiscences about the Depression and what it was like?
Oh boy, no.
Were you a newspaper boy or anything like that?
I did. I sold newspapers. I did on Sundays.
Sure.
And my brother, my older brother, we sold it. We had prize fights in New Jersey.
Yep.
We used to sell afternoon newspapers. In those days, there would be, as I say, I was interested in baseball, and there were new editions would come out, like the Herald Tribune or one of those afternoon newspapers. Right. They'd have 4 editions, and there'd be new bullet scores on each one. Oh yeah, I sold papers, you name it, we did everything. And the Depression days were tough. My dad had a small business, and he went out and he was unemployed, and relatives helped us. And I remember times when food was pretty raunchy.
Pretty thin.
We had some tough days, yeah, we had some tough days. Yeah, those were good experiences because, you know, through those kinds of deprivations, you really grow as a consequence of the experiences.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Right.
Yeah, we knew tough times.
Well, now here you are, and you've been in retirement for what, about 20 years?
Yeah, 20 years. That's right.
And you volunteer, and you do a lot of.
I'm involved in a lot of things. Church work. I'm a professional advisor for the addiction services for self-help groups, alternatives to AA, and I'm getting involved in some politics now at my local level. So it's been
This
fun.
is Wyoming?
Springfield Township.
Springfield
Yeah,
Township.
same thing, that's
Yeah,
Wyoming
right,
and so on.
right.
Yeah, I'm involved in that. I'm not interested in politics, but I'm involved in
Well, you're,
supporting it.
sure, absolutely.
Yep.
You're an involved, concerned citizen.
Right.
And this, as you pointed out earlier, this has been a great influence of our generation in strengthening and building our country in the post-war.
You know, I can't, what's the name of it? Generation X is a new one. What's our generation is the one
Well, they
that
call
really
it
is
the greatest generation.
the great generation, that's
Yeah,
right. Like
greatest.
that one wrote about it, you know.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And there's nothing great about us, but we had the opportunity and the experience. And really the core of America, our generation has been the core.
You're
It's
right.
been good.
And the unusual circumstances of how it came about.
Right.
See, that's what we
It's
were.
the whole 20th century.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
World War I,
And all the things that you and I have seen during our lives, the development of so many high-tech things and so
Absolutely.
forth.
All happened during our time.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I
Because you
should
can
say
look back and forward, and it's been
Yeah.
unbelievable.
That's right.
Unbelievable, the
That's
opportunity.
exactly
It's a
right.
great country. Great
Well,
country.
it's a great country, and we're both fortunate Americans.
Yep,
and,
we've been lucky.
And our country, Dick, and our community are so grateful for people such as yourself and what you have contributed to the community and so forth. And this is so important for people to know about. And that's why this Library of Congress project is
It's a good thing. It
so
really is.
important. And the Public Library of Cincinnati has really taken the ball and run with it, and Dennis Daly has been responsible for
You're a historian, Dennis? Is that your, yeah?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
okay.
I know. You know Ed Ryder with the Ed's historian for Procter & Gamble. He's a good friend.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
wonderful.
My
Yeah.
gosh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Well, you have many friends around, Dick, and I know that you and I have had some experiences together.
Remember Bob Zimmerman, Ted, that ran that?
Oh, yes.
You know, he died 2 years ago.
Yes,
Bob
Great
was a
guy.
wonderful person.
he was a
He's a
wonderful
beautiful man.
person. He was
A
a
beautiful man.
Yes, he was.
I really
indeed.
miss him.
Very gentle and very
Yeah.
bright, very erudite. And yes, that was a great loss. And of course, Aaron Levine, you know,
Oh, yeah.
one of the founders of,
Yeah, Aaron was
of
great.
the ILR, now
Yeah.
the ILE.
Is
That's something.
The Institute for Learning and Education, is that it now?
Institute for, no, wait a minute. Institute for Living Education.
Living Education. It used to be Learning in Retirement, ILR.
Learning in
Now it's Living
Retirement.
Education.
Now it's Living Education, yeah.
I'm still involved with a course now. This spring, we're going to do one on nutrition.
Oh, you
health.
are?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I've done, I've done it, you know, whatever, it's 15 years or so. I think I've done a dozen years.
Yes.
Always have done something. Some of that was with the history stuff.
Of course.
And also nutrition and health. I do it along with Jane Garvin. And we run a program, and I enjoy it.
Well, that's great. You'll remember our friend Tom Griffin.
Oh, yeah, Tom.
The
Yes.
Doolittle Rig.
What? I haven't seen, what's happening with Tom? I haven't
Well,
seen him.
Tom is fine. He's 90.
Is he
And he's just a great guy, as you know. He speaks all the time. He's very available. He kids people. I say, well, I've heard him about 15 times. And as a matter of fact, week before last, he spoke out at the Armstrong Chapel out in Indian Hill, the Methodist church out there. And there were about 60 people turned out there to hear him. And he's just a wonderful raconteur. And
He's a great guy.
he's
Yeah.
a great guy. And he said, I just want you to know, I'm the biggest freeloader in the world. I'll go anywhere for a meal.
That's like,
But you know that comes out of that period in which you and I grew up. That sort of thing was so important in those days. If people couldn't pay you, maybe you got a free meal.
oh, yeah.
Maybe you got a few drinks at the bar, or things like that, or
Oh,
they
yeah.
gave you a book, or something like that.
That's right.
And you accepted that sort of thing.
Yep, it's
This
fun.
is great.
It's been fun.
And I can
Yeah.
see that in your personality and everything. Well, Dick, it's just been a pleasure to be
Thank you.
here
It's
with
been
you.
a pleasure. I didn't know, I just thought I would be talking to Dennis and then
Well,
have you come along. It's great.
I thought of giving you a call, and then I thought, no, by golly, I'll
We'll do it
surprise
full
my
turn.
old friend,
Yeah.
and we'll have a good time, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been an honor for me to hear about
My pleasure.
your life, and now it's on tape.
Yeah.
It's for the archives,
Oh, yeah.
and you'll get a DVD for your
Oh, really?
family, and
That'd
it'll
be
be in
great.
the archives here,
That'd
and
be
I
nice.
guess in Washington DC too. How about that?
Yeah,
So-
I'll send a picture, Dennis. Send it to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got one of them. I've got one as a buck private and then one as an officer. It's
That's
not
wonderful.
very, it's not very great, but anyway, I wasn't in any combat or anything, and yet it was a very enriching
Oh.
experience, and
Well.
also you're able to contribute something.
Well, you made a great contribution,
Yeah.
and we thank you for that.
Yeah.
And we thank the public library for
Yeah.
this
You're
opportunity.
great. It's
Thank
wonderful.
you, Dennis.